Hello and welcome to our podcast, Strong Not Silent. Today we're going to be talking about something which I feel like is not talked about enough, especially in the context of the Pakistan society, male mental health. I have with me Anas, a student of business and psychology who has gone through certain pressures that we're going to be discussing today, and Mr. Hassan, who is a clinical psychologist who will be giving us insights as to how we can make this a topic that is more talked about. So, firstly, I would address this question to you, Hassan. Why do you think mental health, male mental health in Pakistan is such a taboo?
I think it's a phenomena more so worldwide where male's mental health just isn't considered as important या फिर उसको इतनी priority नहीं दी जाती compared to female mental health. Now there are a few reasons for that. One is that quite often, well, mental health is a taboo in of itself, which denotes weakness for a lot of people. Even now, जब मैं किसी को बताता हूँ, I'm a psychologist, people say कि अच्छा दिमाग पढ़ रहे हो या फिर पागलों का इलाज करते हो. Uh, and quite often it's also associated with weakness. And it's in Pakistani society, a man being weak is like, oh my god, मैं weak हूँ. And so that's I think one of the bigger reasons why.
Right. And growing up, were you ever told to man up? And do you think that has ever impacted how your mental health has, progressed over the years?
So of course I have been told to man up quite a few times, and that just comes naturally when we live in the society that we live in. So as Mr. Hassan said, men are treated differently when it comes to mental health, right? So I have been told to man up, and how that has affected me is that sometimes when I feel pressured in situations, when I feel like I can't handle something, I did not feel comfortable speaking up about it in the past.
Right. So, I would like to ask another question, but before that, I feel like this is very important because हमारी society में, although like there are gender stereotypes for both genders, but mostly gender stereotypes are discussed in the aspect of the women, right? Okay, women stereotypes and breaking them. But I feel like a very interesting theme which I feel like लोगों को और awareness होनी चाहिए इसके ऊपर is the financial pressure. ठीक है, the pressure to earn, to be the provider, and from a very young age I believe कि लड़कों को हमारी society में ट्रेन करना शुरू कर दिया जाता है कि तुमने तो कमाना है, तुमने संभालना है. So addressing this to both of you, you can take turns in answering. कि do you think that उसकी वजह से it has ever impacted your mental health and the way your identity has shifted?
Personally, yes, in good and bad ways. It's obviously a cause of a lot of stress and anxiety, especially because Pakistan के हालात aren't good as it is. So even though I've been fortunate enough to be born into a relatively wealthy family, so to speak, so I haven't had itna ज़्यादा pressure that perhaps other males have had. But it's generally there. But it's also good in that I think I would be accomplishing a lot less if I didn't have that pressure. And so I think there's definitely a balance to be had there. जहाँ पे it's not so much के तुमने करना है और यही है और तुम्हारी ज़िंदगी यहाँ पे ख़त्म हो रही है और शुरू हो रही है. But also having those pressures to some degree is important for growth. It's sort of being in that sweet spot, so to speak.
Okay, so from the other end of the spectrum, of course, I'm really young right now. So I have been experiencing this pressure, and it has been getting quite a lot more as I enter into my late 20s, right? So previously, I used to feel very stressed because of the financial pressures and stuff. कि मुझे कमाना है, मुझे कुछ बनाना है जिंदगी में, stuff like that. But looking at the economy and also looking at the condition of like everything, now I've learned to believe that you should strive for best, and then you should learn to live in the moment. You should enjoy the process. So that is the philosophy I'm living by right now, and that helps me in dealing with all of those pressures.
वैसे मैं भी अभी लेट 20s में भी एंटर हुआ. Yeah, not that old.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting. So, another interesting question addressed to you both again. So, have you ever faced a situation? I'm sure you have, as a human, that what's a time we all break down. Okay, when things get too tough, either in teenagers or out in your young adulthood, and so on and so forth. तो कभी ऐसा मोमेंट आया है जहाँ you wanted to really like try it out, but then you had to suppress yourself? And if yes, then why did you think you need to suppress yourself in the first place?
I mean, it's an interesting thing. Even personally, and for a lot of men that I talk to, crying is not something that just आती नहीं है. Right? It's not so much I don't want to cry. या फिर it's just कि it isn't part of my normal mechanisms of. It's not an emotional outlet that I employ, right? And that's part of our upbringing in Pakistan, especially. जहाँ पे men are told to externalize their emotions. इसका मतलब है they'd rather it's much more permissible for them to get angry. कि मर्द गुस्सा हो रहा है, that's fine. But मर्द रो रहा है, ये क्या हो रहा है?
Yeah.
Right? So, like personally, it just very rarely came to me where I had like I couldn't help but cry. Right? As far as suppressing my emotions, um, I don't think I've suppressed my emotions too much. In that case, I am fortunate enough to have a good support system of friends and family. And so, but sometimes it's just something so it doesn't come to me naturally. कि रोना है. जब आ जाता है तो आ जाता है, but it's like far and few in between.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that there can be a lot of healthy emotional outlets to like let out what you're feeling, and crying is one of them. But again, agreeing with you कि पाकिस्तान में especially ये सिखाया जाता है कि गुस्सा कर लो that's okay, but रो लो या कुछ और, even if you talk about your problems that's not okay. That means you're weak. So the most important thing is to have a support system, because जब आपके कुछ healthy friends होते हैं, relationships होती हैं, family आपकी अगर understanding है, so that helps a lot, and you can let out your emotions, even cry if you want to.
Yeah.
So that plays a big role.
Okay. So have you ever suppressed your emotions?
I suppressed my emotions for almost all my life, and then like around 2-3 years ago, I got more aware about the fact कि अच्छी बात होती है अपने अंदर से बाहर निकालना, and आप better feel करते हो when you get it out of your system. So I took a leap of faith and I started talking to friends about it.
Yeah.
And then I felt better, and now I am much more comfortable in talking about my feelings compared to how I used to be.
Also to add to that a little bit, quite often जो मर्दों की orientation भी होती है और जो बोला भी जाता है इसके it's more so a problem solving approach जो मर्द apply करते हैं. Even आप it's a meme के when you ask your male friend for कि आप उनको सिर्फ बता रहे हो तो and they start giving you solutions and you're like I don't want solutions, right? But that's somewhat how guys a little bit are genetically wired, but also society में होता है कि भाई मसले का हल बताओ क्या करना है. But crying is not that, right? Crying is just a point जहाँ पे you're hopeless, you want to let it out, and that's just not part of a typical man's repertoire of जो range of emotions जो experience करते हैं. That's not the way they view the world. So I think that's a big part
So
of
do you
it.
think they're perhaps biologically built that way? क्योंकि ये भी कहा जाता है कि women are naturally more emotional. So is it that also, do you think?
Well, there's a genetic component to it, definitely, but that's not all of it. And like everything else in life, balance is important. Right? कुछ चीज़ों में sure you need to be solution focused. You need to take an approach जहाँ पे मसलों को solve कर रहे हैं.
Yeah.
But sometimes, especially when things are somewhat out of our control, कुछ चीज़ें होती हैं हो गया कोई मसला, can't do anything about it. Right? You need to have that in your repertoire. So to a degree, yes, but a balance is required, which it seems at this point isn't really there.
Yeah, true. So another interesting question I would like to address to you, which even I don't have enough awareness about, and is a term that I feel like is very much used on social media nowadays: toxic masculinity. What do you think it means?
अच्छा, it's interesting because typically जब मुझसे लोग पूछते हैं मैं उनसे पूछता हूँ अच्छा what do you mean, because everyone has a slightly different definition of what it means. Psychologically मेरी किसी किताब में toxic masculinity मैंने नहीं पढ़ा कभी, शायद हो मैंने नहीं पढ़ा. It seems to me like it's more of a political term than a psychological या फिर sociological term than a psychological term. So in that typically what people mean by toxic masculinity is कि जब the way in which the masculine emotions are manifested becomes problematic for the people around them and for themselves, right? In that case, if a man feels like he needs to seek help, right? But help seeking is also something जो मर्दों में एक sort of taboo है,
Yeah.
right? And sorry, and if he isn't seeking help because his masculinity doesn't permit him to do so, it seems to me like that has become toxic.
Yeah.
right? If he treats his family in a particular way because मैं मर्द हूँ और तुम्हें ऐसा होना चाहिए और मुझे ऐसा treat करो, now that becomes problematic and that's toxic.
Yeah.
So for me, if I was to understand toxic masculinity through a psychological lens, this is how I would interpret it.
Okay. And what do you think would be the coping mechanisms if somebody say reaches that extent where they are like मैं मर्द हूँ or and honestly sadly but I do see that happening in our society a lot. ठीक है कि एक वो mindset बन जाता है that I'm the god and just follow me. So do you think there are any coping or healing mechanisms that a man can come out of it?
Well, it's difficult because quite often जब आप ये चीज़ें देखते हो, it's not a byproduct of कि मैंने ये कहीं देखा और ऐसा अच्छा लगा. It's more so generational. जिसका मतलब है हाँ, तो by generational I mean कि उन्होंने ज़्यादातर अपने वालिद को देखा होता है ऐसे करते हुए, अपने दादों को देखा होता है, या फिर just the people around them, कुछ cultures are more inclined towards this than others.
Yeah.
Right? तो उन्होंने कहीं ऐसा देखा होता है. So it's difficult to say कि भाई इसका क्या coping mechanism हो, right? Perhaps starting small would be beneficial. Quite often जब हम देखते हैं कि कोई एक इंसान एक ऐसी पोजीशन ले रहा है, now it could be because they feel like they don't understand the other person's perspective, right? In that के they are less empathetic towards the people जिनको problem हो रहा है इससे, but also they're less empathetic towards themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Because they don't allow themselves certain privileges of connection, of seeking help, of emotional expression. उनका spectrum is limited, right? So perhaps re-education of some sort would be beneficial for them in that ये भी चीज़ें हैं जो तुम कर सकते हो, करके देख लो कैसा लगता है, शायद अच्छा नहीं लगे फाइन वापस आ जाना, बट करके देख लो. Also one of the ways to develop empathy is to actually spend time with the people that are around you in a very real sense. जिसका मतलब है कि आपने घर में औरत को कहा कि ये करना है और नहीं करोगी तो ये हो जाएगा वो हो जाएगा. Perhaps talk to people, talk to those women on a very personal level. Now I understand that's a tough ask, right? And a lot of people won't do that, but I think that's a good way to develop empathy.
Coming to that point where you said that, I feel like अब के youth में फिर भी एक awareness है, like others, you और my peers around me जिनको एक थोड़ी बहुत इस चीज़ पे at least awareness हो गई है baseline कि ठीक है male mental health is also a topic.
Yeah.
But जो एक बहुत I feel like strong aspect है इसका ये है कि आप खुद कैसे वो चीज़ करना सीखेंगे जब आपके जो रोल मॉडल्स रहे, आपका फादर हो सकता है, बड़ा भाई हो सकता है, फ्रेंड हो सकता है, जिन्होंने भी एक ये चेन कंटिन्यू की है ऑफ सप्रेशन. तो हाउ डू यू थिंक does that affect you yourself? जैसे मेरा भाई है, he has seen my father be strong, right, through it all. तो वो कैसे फिर अपने आप को एक थोड़ा सा फ्लेक्सिबल कर सकता है चीज़ों में? Do you think that there's a way out?
Definitely. And the way is exposure. There's no other solution.
Okay.
Right? The way is exposure. जिसका मतलब है कि अगर आप अपने घर में एक पर्टिकुलर चीज़ देखिए और आप अपने घर में रहते हो, राइट? आप घर दुकान घर, अगर आपका ये रूटीन है, then it's going to be very hard to do anything else, right? But if you're exposed to different communities, if you're exposed to different people, if you're exposed to different ways of life, right? That can be through a lot of इसलिए youth में हो रहा है because they're going to university more, right? And so they see people from all cultures, they talk to different people. काफ़ी टाइम उन लड़कों की किसी लड़की से बात होती है एंड लाइक हर, वो कहती है मेरे घर में तो ये नहीं चलता, अच्छा ठीक है ठीक करना पड़ेगा इस चीज़ को, या फिर आई नीड टू मैनेज दिस. And so exposure is the way to, I won't say fix it, but help it.
Yeah, at least get there.
Yeah, to a degree. And it's also sort of, obviously हम अपने generationally देखते हैं कि क्या होता आ रहा है, हम उसे follow करते हैं, but we see a lot of parents now becoming progressive. ये भी हम देख रहे हैं कि there is a definite, a significant subset of people in their 50s, 40s and 60s that are a lot more progressive, more so than they were in the past. Typically research has shown कि जितना आप वक्त के साथ गुजरते हो आप conservative होते जाते हो, right? With age, the younger you are, the more likely you are to be liberal, all things equal. But this is seen कि there is a significant minority जो reverse में भी जा रही है, right? जो conservative से थोड़ी ज़्यादा liberal हो रही है, and that's because they see their children, they see कि oh this has made them so happy, this works for them, and just their love for their children allows them to loosen up on a lot of things. And so it doesn't just work from top down, bottom up भी चलता है.
Okay, interesting. I mean that is a very unique take मुझसे कोई पूछे कि ठीक है मेंटल हेल्थ तुम्हारी किस चीज़ से सबसे ज़्यादा इम्पैक्ट होती है, so I would have a list of answers. But interesting, I have never asked a guy. ठीक है, मुझे नहीं पता कि with you guys क्या symptoms होते हैं, क्या चीज़ें होती हैं जो which triggers you to not, I would not say that कोई ज़रूरी नहीं है कि extreme result of you go into depression or anxiety, but even baseline, feeling sad, upset, something that emotionally touches you. What do you think are those things in your life?
अच्छा, आई फील लाइक जनरली फॉर ऑल मैन द बिगेस्ट थिंग इज सप्रेशन, बिकॉज कोई छोटी चीज़ हो जिंदगी में, बड़ी चीज़ हो, वी डोंट टॉक अबाउट इट, वी डोंट लाइक लेट आउट आवर इमोशंस, तो वो हमारे अंदर ना बिल्डअप होते रहता है, एंड देन इट टेक्स लाइक वेरी लेस टू लाइक सेट द मैच ऑन द फ्यूल का पाइल. तो कभी कभी होता है कि लाइक बहुत टाइम से ना, महीने 2 महीने 4 महीने से यू गोइंग थ्रू समथिंग एंड स्मॉल अदर स्ट्रेसर्स कीप एडिंग ऑन टू इट, फिर अचानक से कोई छोटी बात होगी ना, समवन विल अनॉय यू विद लाइक अ लिटिल कमेंट और समथिंग, इवन completely unjustified reaction आता है and you burst out on them. So that is typically what most men go through because of not being able to manage and let out their emotions.
एज अ क्लिनिशियन आई सेकंड दैट. मैं बहुत देखता हूँ कि फीमेल्स में भी होता है बट मेल्स में डेफिनेटली ज़्यादा होता है, जहाँ पे उनको होता है कि मैं एकदम से मुझे आते हैं मेरे पास, कहते हैं मुझे एंगर इशूज़ है. मैं कहता हूँ अच्छा ठीक है, क्या हो रहा है? मैं ठीक हूँ. उसने ये किया मुझे अच्छा नहीं लगा, मैंने दबा लिया. उसने ये किया अच्छा नहीं, दबा लिया. 2 महीनों अब मैं फट गया और मैं जो हूँ वो चीख लिया, और मेरी बेगम ने कहा कि भाई आपका तो गुस्से का मसला है, आप जाइए किसी के पास. एंड श्योर दैट्स एन एंगर इशू सो टू स्पीक, बट इट्स मोर सो रेगुलेशन इशू. आपको जो उस वक्त आ रहा है तो उस वक्त कुछ करो ना उसका. ठीक है, हैव रेगुलर थिंग्स टू, एंड परहैप्स यू कैन टॉक अबाउट दिस लेटर, टू रिलीव योरसेल्फ ऑफ द स्ट्रेस as well as doing something about it.
I think we should go there because my next question is a lot related to that. The men in my life, personally, I feel like nobody has any extreme anger issues, alhamdulillah, I would say. But I feel like एक constant मसला जो मैंने भी notice किया है, चाहे वो मेरी friendships में हो, मेरी family में हो, कि वो यहाँ वाली बात के वक्त पे नहीं act करते, उस टाइम पी के बैठ जाते हैं, and then one day they just burst out कि भाई तब में ये भी हुआ था, वो भी हुआ था, ऐसे भी हुआ था. So उसके बारे में, as you were saying, how do you like learn to regulate it as a man? Because I feel like it's difficult to convince them.
Yeah, two things. एक is general stress management and second is actually communication, right? And so for general stress management, a lot of things work. For men, exercise is a lifesaver, right? Some sort of physical exercise, not too often. You can do it like twice a week, once a week. Some sort of rigorous sport, basketball, badminton, football works. Going to the gym works. Some people do weekend runs. That works, right? That helps. उसके अलावा having some sort of fraternity. Now what that means is कि कोई बैठक जिसे कहते हैं लड़कों की, कि आपके पास दोस्त हो जहाँ पे बैठो and you let off steam. That's very important, right? That helps sort of calm you down. तो हफ्ते में एक बार या 2 हफ्ते में, whatever your schedule permits, that's important. उसके अलावा there are a lot of general stress techniques कि भाई if you're in a general stressful environment, which a lot of men are, तो see how you can manage that. Compartmentalize होता है, जिसका मतलब है कि आप अपनी जो काम का स्ट्रेस, यू मेक एन अटेम्प्ट टू कीप इट देयर, राइट? एंड जब आप घर पे आते हो तो यू डू नॉट लेट दैट स्ट्रेस आउट देयर, राइट? सो देयर आर लॉट ऑफ डिफरेंट स्ट्रेस मैनेजमेंट थिंग्स दैट मेन कैन डू, बट दैट इज़ जस्ट सो मच एज लेटिंग ऑफ स्टीम. एज फार एज के अब अगर किसी ने आपको कुछ कहा, आपको अच्छा नहीं लगा, आपने दबा दिया, नो लेट ऑफ स्टीम, perhaps that will prolong the amount of time you can keep it in, right? But what you eventually need to do is communicate. आपको जिससे है, if you have problems with your wife, you're having problems with your friends, find a way to sit down and talk about it where both of you can be calm and listen to yourselves. वहाँ पे it's important कि वहाँ पे आप अपने आप को regulate करो. अगर आप बैठ के मुझे तुमसे ये मसला है और वो, and that's not communication. You're basically having a shouting match. And so at that point there will be very little that will be accomplished and very little जो चलेगा. चलो उस वक्त कहेगी ठीक है चुप हो गई मैं, it's not gonna go away. Right? So having expectations from yourself and from the other person and communicating them is important, and that is eventually what men will need to learn in order to work through this.
So next, I guess, एक और जो interesting theme which I have noticed throughout, कि एक चीज़ होती है कि एक तो आपकी अपनी as a man mental health और emotional state है, and then it's the emotional state of the women in your life. ठीक है, could be your wife, your girlfriend, per se, your sister, your mother, your daughter, even one day. So, do you think men are too occupied actually catering to the emotional needs of the women in their life, in terms of catering to their sensitivity, or even like going back कहूँगी वापस के social media में memes बहुत बनती हैं कि इसके emotions और moods से इसको cater करना, could be wife or partner, whoever. तो उसमें do you think at some point you as a man are neglecting your own emotional needs?
Yes and no. Yes, because it makes sense. Because men के अंदर एक servitude वाली चीज़ भी होती है. Quite often you see कि they will feel nice by doing something for someone.
Yeah.
So that could be part of it, but that doesn't mean कि you don't have time for your emotions. Quite often, अगर आप अच्छा, I haven't personally heard that a lot, but if I was to hear it, my first idea would be कि ऐसा तो नहीं है कि this person is using this as an excuse to get out of it to deal with their own emotions. I don't know, I'm just speculating here. But it's very rare कि आपकी लाइफ में होता है कभी कभी कि आपकी लाइफ में कोई ऐसा इंसान हो that is just overwhelming and don't have time for your own emotions. But for a general population and general relationships, if you are not having time to process your own emotions at any point in time, महीने हो गए और आप जो हो वो रिफ्लेक्शन नहीं कर पा रहे हो क्योंकि आप किसी और के बारे में सोच रहे हो, then you need to think about what you're in.
Yeah.
And you need to think about very seriously कि भाई मुझे जो है वो is this even beneficial for me, इसके अंदर मुझे क्या नुकसानात हो रहे हैं. You need to take a step at that point, take a step back at that point in time. अगर इस हद तक जा रहा है कि आप दूसरे की नीड्स को इतनी देख रहे हो कि आप अपने आप को देख ही नहीं पा रहे हो, so that's problematic in any sense.
And I think more than just men, I think वो generally एक चीज़ apply करती है, even as a woman or as a human in short,
Yes.
कि आप कभी भी किसी की needs इतनी like I know you love them and you need to be there for them, but being selfless but to an extent,
Yes.
that it does not start bothering your own self.
Yes.
So next thing I feel like जो कि I especially want to learn as an insight for myself as a girl, because I have men in my life that I love and I want to be there for them. So how do you think, what ideal role can a woman play as a sister, as a wife, as a partner, as a girlfriend, as a mother, जो can which can enable her to be there for the man in her life in terms of the emotional obviously aspect, the subject of our discussion? What do you think we can do?
Well, let me ask you a question first. The question that you proposed to me, have you ever asked the men in your life this question?
No.
Perhaps that's a good start.
Yeah.
I actually asked them. I could give you generic answers and they would be fine. But people are individuals, and sure, they're part of a group, in this case,
Yeah.
men, but they're also individuals. Perhaps and a lot of men don't get asked that their entire lives. कि भाई मैं तुम्हारे लिए क्या कर सकती हूँ या मैं क्या कर सकती हूँ, बहुत सारे पूछा है, ऐसा भी नहीं है कि नहीं पूछते.
Yeah.
But if you want to be there for them in ways that are helpful for them, ask them. Right? And you'll get sometimes they'll be like कि पता नहीं सही हूँ मैं, right? And they just say nothing, but sometimes you actually might get good answers. Yeah, that you कि भाई okay fine, this is what you can do in these situations. I want someone जहाँ पे I feel like they're not judging me, right? Or perhaps I want them to support me or encourage me in certain ways. Quite often that's what men want, just want encouragement.
Yeah.
But asking them is a good start.
Yeah. I think that's good. Do you have anything to say on that?
I would say just be a safe space for them, so like they can feel comfortable sharing what they're going through. And then what women can also do is like help them learn about communication, because goes without saying obviously औरतों की जिम्मेदारी नहीं है आदमियों को सिखाना, but they can still help them if they want to learn about communication, because what I've seen is that women are more inclined towards communicating their issues, and that is why they're seen having more emotional reactions, because they are talking about it and they're okay with talking about it. So if a woman wants to help a man get more comfortable with himself, then she should help him in talking about his feelings.
Okay, so I think baseline is कि बैठ के बात करना.
Yeah, that'd be a good start.
ऐसे सवाल उनसे पूछो जो उनसे कोई कभी नहीं पूछना.
Exactly.
Because honestly, it's an awakening for me also, because you're right, I never asked these questions to the men in my life. Acha, so coming to a bigger taboo, which is therapy. ठीक है, वो even for women in our society, Pakistani context, एक बहुत बड़ा taboo है. Generally mental health के लिए therapy seek करना लोग समझते हैं आप पागल हो अगर आप थेरेपिस्ट के पास जा रहे हो, ठीक है। एंड ऑनेस्टली सैडली ये हमारे अच्छे से अच्छे एसएससी वाले पढ़े लिखे लोगों की भी यही सोच होती है, दैट व्हाई डू यू नीड टू सी अ मेंटल डॉक्टर।
Yeah.
सो उसके बारे में पहले आई वुड लाइक टू आस्क कि आप व्हाट वुड यू लाइक टू से ऑन दैट।
Mm.
उसके बाद आई वुड लाइक यू टू give any personal example, even you Anas could tell me if you ever tried to take therapy, अगर कोई ऐसा point आया आपकी ज़िंदगी में या those around you, your friends or brother or whoever, जिसको they felt the need to seek therapy but something stopped them.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot to say, but a few things. One, I'm very hopeful for the generations that are to come and जो अभी आ रही हैं. I see the trend only going in positive directions, which means कि जितना आप younger demographic देखते हो उतना you see कि they're much more willing to seek help. They're much more open to the concept of therapy. It's much less of a taboo in that generation than it is in the older ones. So general direction I think is positive. Um, it's definitely still a taboo, right? Yeah. Is one thing to understand about therapy is कि definitely हमारा काम is work, part of our work is definitely working with people जो quote unquote पागल हैं, right? And I mean it's interesting कि पागलपन को like psychologically क्या कहते हैं? I think शायद schizophrenia कहते होंगे जो चीज़ें नज़र आती हैं और सुनाई, शायद उसको कहते होंगे. That's one disorder, right? There are a lot of there out there, and you don't need to have a disorder to visit a therapist. That's part of it. अगर आपको टांग में दर्द होता है, आपको दर्द रह रहा है, हो सकता है आपको ऑपरेशन की ज़रूरत हो सकता है वो कहे कि पैर ऐसे नहीं ऐसे रखो या अपने जूते बदल लो. It's somewhat similar. Just because a person is going to a therapist doesn't mean कि वो पागल, and that's something to be said कि पागल लोग भी इतना outcast नहीं है. I mean sure they're part of society, they can be rehabilitated or worked on, but you don't need to have something seriously wrong to go to therapy. A lot of people come for the complete opposite. They want to work towards progressing in their careers. Everything's fine. They're like, but I want to push my career and I want to climb the ladder. Okay, how do we do that? Okay, हम techniques लगाते हैं. That's completely different. Okay? So just understanding it's a wide range of things जो हो सकती हैं and not just कि वो पागल है helps a lot. Right? Personally, I've seen it happen, not too much. I've been fortunate enough कि इतना नहीं देखा मैंने, but it's definitely a lot of people जो come and they're like कि एक तो होता है कि हम बातें कर रहे हैं तो बातों से क्या होगा, but also they're a little afraid of opening up because then वो आते हैं now अच्छा हम आपको सब कुछ बता दें.
Leads back to the suppression issue, I feel.
Yeah, definitely. But in general, I have seen the taboo reduced by quite a bit. Even through my career, वक्त के साथ साथ मैंने देखा the younger you are, it seems कि the more they are open. Personally, जैसे I work at a college as a well-being counselor. So when I joined, a lot of students knew that they wanted to talk to someone about it, they didn't have the opportunity to. And so as soon as they came, they knew कि हमें आना है, and they immediately contacted me. Right? And so I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I think that's good to hear. Anas, what would you like to say on that?
I would say that the taboo thing comes from pride because the people who say कि therapy की ज़रूरत नहीं है, पागल and stuff like that, they feel like they're perfect the way they are and whatever they're doing, whatever their outlets they're using, they feel like that's okay. हाँ मैं ही ठीक हूँ. So that comes from pride, and you need to have some sort of humility to accept the fact that no, I'm not perfect. I don't know how to manage my emotions. Just like the example that you gave, पैर में दर्द होगा तो आप खुद डायग्नोज नहीं करोगे, आप डॉक्टर के पास जाओगे. सिमिलरली अगर आपको लाइफ से डील करने में कुछ आपको प्रॉब्लम होगी तो आप थेरेपिस्ट के पास जाओगे. तो यू डू नॉट नीड टू हैव अ डिसऑर्डर टू गो टू अ थेरेपिस्ट. एंड जनरल वेलबींग के लिए टू थिंक बेटर, to have better patterns in your life. That's why I think therapy is important for everyone, not just people with disorders.
Yeah.
So it's all about the way we view it.
Yeah, and definitely it also ties back to what you talked about pride में कि men के अंदर help seeking कम होती है generally speaking, and so you'll see कि generally women are a lot more likely to seek therapy than men, statistically speaking. Right? क्योंकि men के अंदर वो कि to show weakness and then seek help for it, those are two steps which typically aren't part of a man's go-to.
Yeah. Okay, so coming towards the conclusion, the one last question I would like to address to you, Hassaan. What does healing look like for a man in a society which doesn't even allow it to feel?
Oh, That's a big question. I mean, I'd have to ask healing kiss cheese se, because a man can heal from a lot of things. Um, I'm not sure how to answer this question, to be honest. Uh, Perhaps what it looks like is a realization that there needs to be something that needs to be addressed. Right? So that's a start. Okay, there's something that needs to be addressed. Second, finding a channel to do so, and that doesn't necessitate going to a psychologist. Again, if you can, part of my work as a therapist is कि आपको मेरे पास आने की ज़रूरत ना पड़े. अगर आप मेरे पास पूरी ज़िंदगी आ रहे हो, then I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Because you shouldn't be dependent on me to let it out. या फिर sure, शुरू में, yeah, in the middle, sure, but eventually you need to find places in your life where you can do it yourself. Right? And so if you can do it yourself, बहुत अच्छी बात है. If you can develop coping mechanisms जहाँ पे you have your friends and family, जहाँ पे you can talk, you can let it out, जहाँ पे you have a support system and it's manageable for you, God, अच्छी बात है. That's healing. That's fine. There's nothing to heal there. अच्छी बात है. Right? But if it seems like it's becoming unmanageable and it's becoming out of hand, then yeah, come and talk to someone, and उसके बाद it can go any direction.
Okay. I feel like what I take from that is that generally भी even as a women I relate to it कि I feel like हम लोग ना सबसे पहला step in any kind of mental awareness is the way. ठीक है, जब तक आप खुद नहीं कन्विंस होगे ना कि आपको you need to face an issue or fix it, could be as minor as feeling sad often. ठीक है, it does not have to be anything extreme as a mental disorder. So I feel like first step is to acknowledge it within you as a human, and then trying to cope with it through XYZ mechanisms. Could be your
Definitely.
support system, or if in extreme cases, maybe going to a doctor also if you feel like you need to go to a doctor. So yeah, I think that was it at my end. If you guys would like to add anything, you're more than welcome. Any message that you would like to give probably the men and women alike watching this video sooner or later, what would be the one conclusive message that both of you take by turns would like to give the men of our society, Pakistani context?
Hmm. Perhaps give it a shot. That would be my message. मैं ये नहीं कह रहा कि उसमें घुस जाओ. Give it a shot, see how it goes for you. If it doesn't go well for you, fine, ठीक है. But don't knock on it until you try it, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to say a similar thing. Just take a leap of faith and like start talking about it. Start sharing your feelings and stop being so prideful. कि नहीं मैं आदमी हूँ and like मुझे करना है stuff like that. Because we are now in a new generation. We are in a new time, and things are changing. So I would suggest all the men to like keep up with that and become healthier versions of themselves for themselves and also for the people around them.
Yeah, true. I think that is very
Definitely.
important what you said at the end. And so yeah, thank you so much. This was insightful for me as a girl. Okay. And I honestly not gonna lie, I'm taking a lot away from this table today for the men in my life that I love, and I would like to be there for them in ways that I have never been there for them. And I feel like not just the men watching this, even the women watching this, I feel like you play a very important role in men in your life. And I have really good hopes from this generation and the generation that is to come, because the best part is that baseline पे communication start हो गई है about mental health. I think that is the start of a very long journey, but at least we're starting on it. And yeah, so I would just ask you, as a girl, to be there for the men in your life, and to the boys or men watching this, it's okay to feel.